What if the noblest quest in history was nothing more than a glorified bloodbath disguised as a pilgrimage? Intrigued? You should be, but brace yourself, this isn't the fairy tale you've been sold. Strap in, because the grimy truth of crusading will sear your conscience like a branding iron. Forget the shining armor and gallant knights. Picture a stench so vile it could wake the dead, a mix of sweat, blood, and dreams turned to ash. A reality where glory is a mirage, and honor is just a ruse to lure unsuspecting souls into a chaotic frenzy. Crusaders weren't heroes, they were glorified mercenaries, swinging swords for the highest bidder, or the most fervent zealot. Think you'd like to trade your comfy bed for a cold stone floor, your Wi-Fi for unsanitary latrines? Welcome to the Crusader's life, a carnival of despair where survival is the only prize. What's the first order of business? Mass slaughter. Yes, the Crusades were the original reality show, featuring blood-drenched episodes that would make your favorite horror flick look like a kindergarten play. Cities burned, innocents perished, and the only winners were the vultures circling overhead. Ever seen a city fall? The screams of the defeated echo like a banshee in the night. Romanticize it however you want, but the Crusaders were not saviors, they were the Grim Reapers dressed as saints. And let's talk about the camaraderie. You think your office politics are cutthroat? Try sharing a tent with a bunch of men who believe God wants them to murder for glory. Trust is as fragile as the hope of surviving the next ambush. You'd barely know your brother-in-arms before he stabs you in the back, literally. Loyalty is a fleeting concept when the promise of loot dangles like a forbidden fruit. Now, who could forget the plagues? No, not the divine retribution you might expect. Just think of rats the size of small dogs scuttling through the trenches of your so-called crusade. Did you bring your hand sanitizer? No? Well, congratulations! You're a prime candidate for the next casualty of disease. The promise of paradise awaits, right after the festering sores and the delirium set in. It's like signing up for a vacation that turns into a death march. So, what's the kicker? The paradox, a valiant quest for faith that spirals into madness and betrayal. The glory of God? More like a ticket to a hellscape where every step taken is a stumble closer to the abyss. You think you're brave? Heroes don't hide from battle, they don't flinch at the thought of slaughter. They're just as likely to trade their sword for a dagger in the back, all while chanting hymns in a language no one can understand. Can you feel it? The pulse of danger thrumming in the air, the laughter of demons echoing in the shadows. History romanticizes the Crusaders' plight, but the truth is far darker, a sinister riddle yearning for resolution. Would you still want to wear that armor, or does the weight of reality crush your dreams like a fragile glass chalice? The answer lies in the shadows. Choose wisely, for once you step into the darkness, there's no turning back. The sun bled its last light over the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows that clawed at the ground. It was dusk, the kind of twilight that whispered secrets to the wind while the villagers moved in a hurried dance, their hearts pounding against their ribs like caged birds desperate for freedom. I stood there, frozen, the weight of the world pressing down on me, my breath caught in my throat. The air simmered with an electric tension, fear, urgency, hope. Somewhere off in the distance, the clash of metal rang out like a heartbeat, rhythmically pounding against the fabric of our lives. I remember the way Judith's fingers trembled as she clutched her infant son to her chest, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and determination. I remember the moment her gaze met mine, two souls suspended in an eternity of uncertainty, as she whispered, "What will happen to us?" Despite my heart racing, I had no answer. I was just as lost, just as gripped by desperation. The world around us was tumbling, unraveling, and here we were, at the edge of something monumental. "Do you understand?" a voice barked from the crowd, sharp as the blade it wielded. It belonged to Thomas, a man whose laughter once echoed through the tavern, now twisted by a fervor I barely recognized. "The enemy is at our door. They desecrate our holy places. We must rise." His eyes shone with a wild light, a manic glimmer that sent shivers skittering down my spine. The villagers stood enraptured, caught between faith and fear, hope and despair. The church bell tolled ominously, each clang a hammer striking the anvil of our fate. What did it mean to have faith when the foundations were crumbling? I felt the weight of 1,000 dreams pressing down on me, each one a fragile thread in a tapestry now unraveling. The ghosts of our ancestors hovered nearby, their whispers like the rustle of autumn leaves, urging us to remember, to act. I stepped closer to Judith, my breath mingling with her baby's soft coos, that innocent sound a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around us. "What will happen if we don't fight?" she asked, her voice trembling like a candle flickering in a storm. I could see the battle within her, torn between the safety of her home and the pull of destiny, the promise of greatness that echoed in Thomas's words. I wanted to tell her that it was all right to be afraid, that fear was a living thing, curling around the heart and squeezing tight. The townspeople began to chant, a rhythm rising like the tide, "God wills it. God wills it." A mantra that seeped into every pore, tainting the air with fervor. It tasted bitter, like ashes on the tongue, yet intoxicating enough to drown out reason. I felt the pull, the call to arms beckoning not just from the battlefield, but from the very marrow of our being. This wasn't just about land or glory, it was about faith, about the way we wove our stories into the great tapestry of existence. I looked at Thomas, his face flushed with passion, a warrior born from the dust of our ancestors, yet I knew he was flawed. He had lost his son to the pestilence that swept through our village like a merciless ghost, and now he wore his grief like armor. Was this desire for blood and honor a way to silence his heart's mourning? "We are not warriors, Thomas," I said, the words tasting like lead on my tongue. "We are farmers, craftsmen, not anymore." He cut me off, his eyes wild, and for a brief moment, I felt like the world had shifted. "The time for quiet lives is over. The tides of history are rising, and we must meet them." Judith's hand tightened around her child as I felt hers tremble. "But at what cost?" she murmured, her voice barely rising above the cacophony. In her eyes, a storm brewed, one I could not quell. I saw her dreams of a peaceful life shatter like glass, each piece glinting ominously as the weight of the world pressed upon her. Was it worth it? To fight for something so far removed from the mundane joys of bread baking and laughter shared over the fire? In that moment, when the world felt suspended between breath and heartbeat, I thought of the vastness of the cosmos. The stars above seemed to mock our petty squabbles, twinkling in an ancient dance of indifference. Yet within that indifference lived a flicker of hope. I wanted to scream at the heavens, to shake my fists at the gods who spun the wheel of fate, to demand an answer for this suffering. But instead, I stood silently, watching as the shadows of our choices began to loom ever larger. As twilight deepened into night, the air thickened with tension, the kind that wraps around you like a shroud. "We must prepare," Thomas urged, and with each word, I felt the gravity of the moment deepen. The villagers nodded, their faces a tapestry of resolve and fear. I knew then, as the first star pierced the darkness, that we were entering an abyss, a world that would demand every ounce of courage we possessed. Judith's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, as I took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Whatever happens," I began, but the words felt inadequate, a mere whisper against the roar of destiny. I looked around, at the faces of our neighbors, at the flickering torches lighting up the night, casting long shadows that danced grotesquely against the walls. In that moment, the call to arms echoed through the air, not just as a rallying cry, but as a haunting melody that would follow us into battle. I could feel it in my bones, the weight of history pressing down, urging us to march toward an uncertain fate. As we prepared to step into the fray, every heartbeat became a drum, reverberating through the very core of our being, of fear, bravery, and the unrelenting desire to be remembered. And somewhere, hidden in the folds of our lives, lay the true battle, not against an enemy armed with swords and shields, but against the fragile threads of our humanity. Would we stand united, or would we fracture beneath the weight of our choices? As the night deepened, the answers remained obscured, shrouded in shadows that danced and wove through the fabric of our fate, leaving us standing on the precipice of a story that had just begun. The church bells toll at midnight, a haunting echo slicing through the stony silence. Each chime resonates like a heartbeat, heavy and laden with dread. I stand there in the shadows, my heart pounding in a frenzied rhythm, and I can't shake the feeling that the night holds a secret, a twisted, throbbing truth waiting to emerge. A flicker of torchlight dances across the cobblestones, illuminating a figure wrapped in a tattered robe, face hidden beneath a hood, hands trembling as they clutch a worn leather satchel. What treasures lie inside? What sins have been committed for the sake of salvation? I remember the first time I saw her. Clara, with her fiery hair and fierce eyes, she had challenged everything I believed in. Surrender yourself to the light, she preached, the crowd hanging on her every word. Forsake the false idols of wealth and power. But beneath her zeal, I glimpsed desperation, a hunger that gnawed at the edges of her faith. But Clara isn't just a prophet of righteousness. She is also a woman who wrestles with the shadows of her own past. What does it mean to be a guardian of the truth when that truth can burn? The stakes are rising, and I know what's coming. I can taste the bitterness in the air. Economic gain whispers seductively, promising security and ease, while religious zeal screams for purity and sacrifice. But where do the lines blur? The flickering torchlight reveals another figure, Jonas, the merchant. Grey streaks through his hair, but his eyes burn with youthful ambition. He stands just beyond Clara's reach, a calculating presence, always counting. Faith is just another currency, he had said once, a smirk playing on his lips like a serpent's tongue. You can't eat piety. The word slithered into my mind, a reminder that survival often demands compromise. I remember the day the church declared war on the merchants. Clara's voice rang through the streets, fierce and wild, rallying the faithful to rise against those who dared to profit from God's grace. We will purge our land of corruption, she cried, fervor igniting the air. But Jonas, with his glinting coins and sharp smile, merely saw opportunity amid the chaos. Sacrifices for those with nothing left to lose, he whispered to me later, that same serpent-like smile widening. And I have much to gain. The city itself seems to hold its breath, caught in this whirlwind of idealism and greed, religious fervor and economic ambition. I wander through the marketplace, watching, listening. Shadows stretch and twist under the dim lanterns, as if the very stones are alive with secrets, whispering truths only the brave dare to confront. The scents of spices and baked bread swirl together, a strange contrast to the tension thickening in the air. Then there's Margot, Clara's devoted follower, a woman who gave up everything for the cause. Yet, she's haunted by dreams of a life left behind, a bustling home filled with laughter, the warmth of a family. I sacrifice my joy for a higher calling, she confesses one starless night, her voice trembling like autumn leaves in a gale. But what if that calling is just a mirage? The fragility in her question cuts deep, echoing through the stillness of the night. Each character is a thread in this tangled web, pulled tight by the strain of their convictions, a delicate balance on the edge of a precipice. I find myself caught between their worlds, a witness to the storm brewing, feeling the weight of their choices press against my chest, stifling my breath. Clara's fire ignites something within me, but Jonas's pragmatism whispers sweetly in my ear, tempting me to forsake the ideal for the attainable. The confrontation is inevitable. The night that will decide everything looms closer, each heartbeat a countdown. It's a dance of faith and currency, zeal and desire, as Clara steps forward, her voice rising in a fervent crescendo. The merchants are liars, she proclaims, her eyes aflame with righteous fury. They prey on the weak, turning salvation into profit. The crowd surges, a tide of humanity caught in the undertow of her passion. But Jonas, sleek as a shadow, counters with a steely resolve. And what is your faith worth if it cannot feed your children? His words slice through the fervor like a dagger. The air thickens, the tension palpable. Margot's hand grips my arm, her knuckles white, eyes wide with fear. Is this what we fought for? To tear each other apart. I want to scream, to tell them that they're dancing on the edge of oblivion, caught in a struggle that mirrors the very essence of humanity. The whispers of the city grow louder, shadows creeping closer as the clock ticks on, the spectre of despair looming ever nearer. Dreams collide with reality in a haunting ballet of despair and hope, regret and ambition. As Clara's voice crescendos to a fever pitch, the crowd surges, a living beast embodying the chaos within each of us. Yet, beneath the surface, I sense the flickering embers of doubt, a hesitation that threatens to fracture their united front. They cling to faith, but I can see it, the gnawing uncertainty, the cracks spreading like spider webs across their hearts. And in that moment, it becomes clear. This isn't just a battle of ideals, it's a clash of spirits, a reckoning that will unveil the true nature of their souls. Clara's fierce conviction battles Jonas's cold pragmatism, tearing at the fabric of their beings, exposing the raw humanity beneath their fervor. I feel it, that overwhelming urge to run, to flee from the maelstrom of emotions threatening to swallow me whole. But I remain, bound by the gravity of their struggle, watching as the night bleeds into dawn. The lines between zeal and greed blur, and I can't help but wonder what becomes of the soul caught in the storm, the heart torn asunder by misguided motivations. As the first light breaks, casting shadows long and haunting, I realize this isn't just their fight, it's ours, a reflection of our own choices, our own fears. And as the sun rises, illuminating the wreckage of their beliefs, I know this is only the beginning. Their stories will intertwine, each decision leading them deeper into the abyss or closer to redemption. The night may have ended, but the battle has just begun. The sun hung low in the sky, a blood-orange bruise fading against the horizon, as Elena clutched the rusted sword hilt in her trembling hands. It felt wrong, too heavy, too unwieldy for someone whose heart still thudded wildly with the innocence of youth. She could hear the clash of steel, the frantic screams that pierced the air like arrows, and somewhere, buried deep within the cacophony, a child's cry. It was all too much. This new life forged in the heat of violence, a life where every dawn came draped in the shroud of death. I remember the first time I tasted fear here, the warmth of my breath mixing with the dust of the streets, the scent of sweat and blood mingling like a grotesque perfume. It clung to my skin, seeped into my bones. I remember the day we arrived, fresh-faced and wide-eyed, believing in the glory of battle, the promise of honor. But that promise, like the rising sun, had long since set, leaving shadows that danced hungrily around us, eager to swallow the last shreds of hope. The Crusader states were a cacophony of contradictions, a land where the stench of decay battled against the sweet perfume of citrus, where merchants hawked their wares beneath banners stained with the blood of fallen comrades. It was a place where survival meant making difficult choices, where the line between friend and foe blurred as quickly as day turned to night. Elena tightened her grip on the sword, thinking of Thomas, her brother. He was out there, somewhere in the chaos, fighting against a tide of enemies with a bravery that terrified her. She remembered the way he used to tease her, spinning tales of chivalry and knights in shining armor, as if war were some grand adventure rather than a brutal game played at the expense of lives. "It's all nonsense," she whispered to herself, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. But she needed to believe in something, anything, just to keep the darkness at bay. "Where are you, Thomas?" she called out, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. The thought of him lying cold beneath the unforgiving earth filled her with a dread so profound it swallowed her whole. The moments they shared had become ghosts, haunting the spaces between breaths. She could almost hear his laughter echoing in her mind, a melody that grew fainter as the clamor of battle raged on. And then, there was Malik. A soldier with a heart burdened by secrets that twisted like vines around his soul. I met him during what felt like the end of the world, an evening when the sun dipped so low it seemed to threaten obliteration. He had a way of looking at me, as if he saw past my armor, past the mask I wore to shield myself from the terror that bubbled just beneath the surface. He held the scars of war like badges of honor and shame, etched into his skin, each one telling a story of loss, of choices made in desperation. "Every moment is a gamble," he had said, the weight of his words heavy with truth. "And I'm a poor player." I remember how he smiled then, a fleeting flicker of light, before it was swallowed by the darkness that enveloped us all. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, a cruel reminder of innocence lost, of what we were fighting for. "Will we ever see that world again?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but the question hung in the air like a noose, waiting to tighten around our throats. He shrugged, eyes clouded with memories that tormented him, as if he were searching for solace in the ruins of a past life. "If we survive," he replied, "the world will be different. We will be different." But what did survival mean in a place where every heartbeat echoed with the threat of violence? I felt it then, a tremor in the air, an electric charge that signaled the storm to come. The soldiers moved like shadows, faces obscured by fear and determination, and I was swept along in their wake, pulled into the whirlpool of chaos. And just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world into darkness, the battle erupted with ferocity. Swords clashed, and the air thickened with the acrid scent of fire and blood. The cries of the fallen rang out, haunting melodies woven into the fabric of this new reality. I remember stumbling, my breath coming in ragged gasps, as I sought to find Thomas, my heart pounding like a war drum. In that moment, it felt as if time had warped, stretching out into infinity, every heartbeat a reminder of the fragility of life. I could hear Elena's voice in the distance, a desperate call that clawed at my insides. "Thomas! Where are you?" It was an echo that reverberated through the chaos, a plea that pierced the darkness. And there he was, my brother, his silhouette framed against the backdrop of flames, a knight painted in shadows. He was fighting, a whirlwind of ferocity, and I felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. But then, as if the heavens themselves had turned against us, I saw it, a flash of steel aimed at his back, the deadly arc of a blade that would sever our bond, forever. "No!" I screamed, the word tearing from my throat, raw and primal. In that heartbeat, everything froze, the world, the chaos, the very air we breathed. I lunged forward, desperation coursing through my veins, pushing through the throng of warriors like a river breaking through a dam. This was our life now, a tapestry woven with the threads of joy and sorrow, triumph and despair. We wore our scars as badges, but beneath the surface lay a churning storm, a relentless tide that threatened to sweep us away. I had learned to dance with the shadows, to embrace the darkness, yet every step felt like an echo of a life once lived, a life where laughter came easily, where love blossomed before it withered away. In the heart of the battle, surrounded by ghosts of my own making, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down, an anchor that threatened to drag me beneath the waves. I fought to keep my head above water, to cling to the shreds of hope that flickered like dying embers. The sun had set, but the nightmare was far from over. In that moment, I understood, the only certainty in this harsh new reality was that the struggle would continue, that every heartbeat would echo with the weight of survival. And as the chaos enveloped us, I knew we were forever bound by this unholy dance, entangled in the threads of a fate we could neither escape nor comprehend. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and smoke, an acrid blend that clawed at the back of the throat. I stood at the edge of the encampment, watching as the flames danced and flickered, shadows leaping across faces that once gleamed with hope now painted in the hues of weariness. The drum of hooves echoed in the distance, a sinister cadence that sent chills racing down my spine. The clamor of metal clashed, echoing through the night like a warning bell. I remember feeling the tightening in my chest, the kind that swells like a tempest, the kind that whispers of doom. "Are you prepared for the march?" The voice pierced through the chaos. It belonged to Elias, whose eyes were twin wells of darkness, haunted yet fierce. He was a man of contradictions, a knight cradled by the weight of duty yet shackled by the shadows of his past. His armor gleamed with the night's reflections, but I wondered if he could see the reflection of his own soul trapped within. I began, the words slipping out like secrets. I remember the stories from the taverns, the tales of glory and valor. They spoke of triumph, of knights charging like thunder through the ranks of the enemy. But this? My voice trembled, barely a whisper against the crackling fire. This isn't what I imagined. This is death waiting to unfold. This is war, not a fairy tale, Elias said, and for a moment, the firelight caught the glimmer of pain in his eyes, a fleeting flicker of vulnerability. He turned away, blending into the chaos of the encampment, leaving behind a phantom of his presence and the lingering question, what price do we pay for glory? Then there was Clara, the healer with hands both delicate and calloused, a juxtaposition of gentleness and grit. She was patching wounds, her fingers deftly weaving through blooded bandages, a dance of despair and hope. I caught her gaze, full of fire and fear, as the echoes of screams wafted from the darkness beyond our flickering sanctuary. "What if they don't come home?" she murmured, her voice barely rising above the hiss of the flames, a prayer suspended in the air. "What if they become ghosts before the dawn?" "Ghosts!" I echoed, the word a bitter pill caught in my throat. "What if we all become ghosts?" The night wrapped around us, thickening like a shroud, and I felt it, a rising tide of uncertainty, a swell of dread that clawed at my insides. I thought of the families we were leaving behind, of the loves left unspoken, of dreams barreling toward the precipice of oblivion. The stars blinked down at us, distant and cold, as if mocking the frailty of our existence. I remember long nights and bright fires, I said, trying to hold on to something tangible, something real. The tales of our forefathers, their conquests and betrayals. They say history is written by the victors, but what if this is our end? What if our stories dissolve into whispers, lost in the winds of time? Clara's eyes glistened, mirroring the flicker of firelight, mirroring the hope we clung to, however fragile it was. Then we fight. We fight to be remembered. Her voice was steady, a lifeline thrown into the churning sea of despair. But as the cadence of distant hooves grew louder, a sinister force creeping through the shadows, I felt the fabric of our resolve rippling. Where was the valor in this? Where was the honor? The clatter of swords, the clash of shields, the cries of the dying, they were all notes in a symphony of despair. And then it happened. The first scream sliced through the encampment, visceral and raw, ringing in my ears like a tolling bell. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't look away. A figure stumbled forth from the darkness, cloaked in blood, eyes wide with terror. "They're coming," he gasped, the words tumbling from his lips, frantic and jagged. "They're upon us." The hordes. Panic erupted like a fever, the camp igniting with chaos. Men dashed for their weapons, their faces morphing into masks of fury and fear. Clara pressed her palms against her temples, caught between the urge to heal and the instinct to flee. "Stay close!" I shouted, grabbing her wrist, the warmth of her skin grounding me amid the storm of panic. Elias was already at the front, a silhouette of defiance, sword raised high, calling out against the tide of impending doom. "Stand firm!" His voice resonated like a battle hymn, defiant amidst the cacophony. I watched him, a man willing to embrace the void, and I wondered if he saw the ghosts of his own past lurking in the shadows, echoes of lives lost, of battles fought for honor's sake, all culminating in this moment. The night exploded into a frenzy as a wave of armored men, faces twisted by rage and desperation, crashed against our defenses. I felt the weight of steel against my flesh, the chaotic rhythm of war echoing through my bones. I was swept into the tide, the world around me a blur of color and sound, fear puncturing through the armor of resolve. "Fight!" Clara's voice pierced the chaos, but I wasn't sure if I was fighting for honor, for survival, or simply for the sake of existence. I felt alive and yet hollow, each heartbeat a reminder of what was at stake. With every swing of my weapon, I could feel the weight of history pressing down on my shoulders. Each clash of swords was like the ticking of a clock, time slipping away, moments bleeding into one another, destinies intertwining in this dance of death. And in the eye of that storm, I remembered. I remembered the laughter of friends gathered around a fire, the warmth of camaraderie, the promise of tomorrow. But in this moment, those memories felt like ghosts, specters haunting the battlefield, whispering tales of what used to be. "Together?" Elias roared, his voice crashing over the chaos, a beacon in the darkness. Together, we fought. Together, we fell. The night folded around us, the darkness tangible and consuming, the perils of our march looming ever closer as we stood at the brink of eternity, battling not just the enemy before us, but the very essence of our frailty. And then, in that heart-stopping instant, a new scream rose above the din, a haunting wail that echoed in the marrow of my bones. What was about to happen? I had no answers. Only the future hung suspended, pregnant with uncertainty, and the cosmos bore witness to our struggle, indifferent yet all-consuming. In that chaos, I felt time slip away, a clock unwinding, the past merging with the present until it all blurred into one. I had no choice but to keep fighting. The dance of life and death was upon us. And as the night deepened, I could only grasp the fleeting moments, the breath of hope amidst despair, as the spectre of ghosts surrounded us, an echo of what was yet to come. The air stank of desperation, a thick, putrid fog that clung to the walls of the crumbling fortress. A child's wail echoed in the silence, piercing, raw, a sound that ripped through the stagnant ether of despair. I remember the way the sound twisted in my gut like a knife, the way it gnawed at the last remnants of hope. I can still see her, a gaunt figure with sunken cheeks, cradling her brother, his body limp, a fragile husk of what once was. In that moment, time seemed to freeze, the very universe holding its breath, as if the earth itself ached to witness this tragedy unfold. Emmeline stood frozen by the window, her eyes vacant, glassy like the surface of a forgotten pond. The sun hung low, a dim glow casting shadows that danced mockingly around her. She should have been cooking, should have been bustling about, but instead, she was haunted by the spectre of hunger. She remembered the last meal they had, the last meal she had made, a thin broth made from bones picked clean, scraps turned to memories, no more than a cruel joke in the face of empty bellies. Food, she whispered, as if the word itself was an incantation that could summon sustenance from the void. Across the room, a man named Thomas shifted uneasily, his hands trembling as they clutched an old sword, its blade dulled by neglect. What use is a weapon against starvation? His thoughts twisted like the banner that hung limp above them, once vibrant but now a mere shadow of its former glory. I remember the taste of bread, he murmured, a ghost of a smile flickering on his lips before it faded, replaced by dread. I remember the way it crumbled, how it filled the belly. What's more powerful, a sword or a loaf? The irony was thick, palpable, both were useless now. Outside, the world wore its chaos like a shroud, the distant clang of metal and cries of the wounded filtering through the walls. They were trapped in a tomb, a fortress of despair, a place where the echoes of war mingled with the whispers of the dying. The siege had begun weeks prior, a slow tightening of the noose around their throats, and now, the rope was fraying. Starvation gnawed at them like a ravenous beast, and disease loomed just beyond the threshold, a dark, relentless tide waiting to crash over the fragile remnants of their existence. I remember the faces around me, hollow and skeletal, sunken deep like forgotten wells. There was a woman named Margot, once the heart of their ragtag family, once laughing and dancing, now a shadow. She appeared to be fading, blending into the very stone of the fortress. "Thomas," she rasped, her voice a brittle whisper. "Do you think I'll see the market again? Will the sun warm my skin?" Her laughter echoed in his mind like a ghost, the sound sharp and cruel in the face of her current reality. He wanted to tell her it would be fine, that they would feast again, that freedom was just a stone's throw away. But the truth hung heavy between them, pressing down like the weight of the world. "I remember," he began, choking on the words. "I remember the scent of earth after rain, the warmth of a loaf just out of the oven." Memories danced like phantoms between them, but they were tainted now, soaked in bitter longing. And then it came, like a whisper of death. The first cough was barely audible, a soft, rasping sound that slipped through the cracks. But soon, it spread like wildfire, a chorus of gurgling breaths, punctuated by the gasps of those who felt the chill of the reaper's fingers creeping up their spines. The disease was merciless, a silent thief snatching away life as they withered, a haunting reminder that they were not merely starving, they were dying. Emmeline turned from the window, her heart pounding. "We have to do something," she pleaded, her mind racing, yet filled with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. "We can't just sit here and wait." But there was nowhere to go. No escape. The enemy was not just outside, it was within. It was hunger, sickness, despair. It was the way the shadows crept closer each day, the way they stole the laughter and replaced it with despair. Do you think they'll break the walls?" Margot's voice trembled, each word a fragile prayer. "Do you think we'll be free?" But freedom was a lie. The walls were closing in, squeezing until breath came in desperate gasps, and their dreams of escape faded like smoke. Outside, the world went on regardless. The birds still flew, the sun still rose and set, indifferent to their plight. And yet, within those walls, the climate was changing. Anxiety hung thick in the air, a tangible entity that danced among the shadows, and with it came a sense of inevitability. The thought curled around Thomas's heart, squeezing until it hurt. They were not just besieged by thorns and arrows, they were ensnared by their own bodies, ravaged by unseen foes. "I'm scared," Emmeline confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, a tremor that betrayed her resolve. "I'm scared of what I might do to survive." The thought of survival twisted within them all, gnawing at their souls. What would they become, those who had once cherished life? Would they barter their humanity for a scrap of bread? Would they dance with madness, laughing in the face of mortality? In that moment, Thomas's heart raced, an echo of the war drums outside, and he thought of the choices they would face in this dark night. The choices haunted him, looming like shadows on a moonless night. He could feel the specter of starvation creeping closer, and with it, desperation. There was no clear path forward. Only a tightening spiral, drawing them into a darkness from which there might be no return. Time ticked on, the walls pulsing like a heartbeat, and the specters of hunger and disease circled like vultures, waiting for the inevitable. I remember the way the fortress felt, a suffocating cocoon, a grave wrapped in stone. The ghosts of dreams lingered, half-formed and haunting. And I remember the last flicker of hope, how it dimmed under the weight of despair. The air crackled with tension, like the moment before a storm, thick and electric. The market was alive with shouts and laughter, vendors hawking their wares under an unforgiving sun, but beneath the surface, something darker churned. I stood there, frozen, half hidden behind a stack of unripe melons, watching a young girl, her face smeared with dirt, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity, reach for a piece of fruit. My heart ached for her, a tug of empathy that felt like a fist around my chest. Before she could touch the vibrant red apple, a man burst forth, rage igniting his voice, "Get your hands off that, you filthy creature!" The girl flinched, retreating, the innocence of her gesture shattered. I remember the way the vendor's eyes burned with hatred, twisted into something grotesque by ignorance and fear. I wanted to shout, to run to her side, to protect her from the words that fell like stones, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed by the weight of it, the clash of cultures, raw and violent, the misunderstandings that twisted people into caricatures of themselves. There was a man named Amir, a father driven to desperation, his family struggling on the edge of survival. I remember the lines etched into his brow, a map of all that he had lost. "I wanted to give them a better life," he would say, voice cracking, eyes distant. He had dreams, once, of sending his children to school, of teaching them the language of opportunity. But in this place, every attempt to rise was met with hostility, the unyielding wall of prejudice that turned neighbors into adversaries. Each morning, he walked through the market like a ghost, invisible yet painfully aware, longing for connection but finding only hostility. And then there was Clara, a woman with dreams of a vibrant future, eyes sparkling with ambition. But her heart thudded with a fear she couldn't shake, a fear that twisted inside her like a thorn. "Why can't they understand?" she would whisper, staring into the night, haunted by the images of what could be friendships, laughter, a tapestry woven from the threads of many cultures. Instead, the air thickened with suspicion, every interaction a landmine waiting to explode. I remember her rage, her frustration bubbling like a simmering pot, threatening to spill over into something destructive. In the shadows of that market, where light and dark danced in a precarious balance, misunderstandings festered like wounds that refused to heal. Words became weapons, the whispers of the past echoing in every glance, every sneer. "Do they not see us?" Amir would ask, grief staining his voice, as if he were pleading with the universe itself, searching for answers in the stars that blinked coldly overhead. And I remember the moment it all came crashing down. Clara, fueled by a fire that had been stoked too long, confronted Amir, her voice a rising tide of anguish. "You think we're the problem? You're the invaders here," she shouted, the world freezing around us, the air thick with rage and hurt. The market fell silent, an entire universe suspended on the tip of a knife, as the two stood face to face, trembling with the weight of their anger, each convinced their pain was greater than the other's. I felt the air crackle, a prelude, a warning, and I wanted to scream, to pull them apart, to heal the rift that yawned between them, but I was trapped in this moment, a witness to the unraveling. "We are not so different," Amir cried, voice cracking like dry earth under the summer sun, desperation bubbling beneath the surface. "My children deserve the same chance as yours." But Clara was lost in her fury, unable to see the truth through the fog of her own fears, her heart bruised and battered from the weight of her own struggles. "You don't understand. You came here and took what little we had left." Words twisted like daggers, cutting deep into the fabric of their shared reality, the air thick with the taste of blood and betrayal. In that moment, beneath the cacophony of misunderstanding, I felt the world shift. The sky darkened, shadows stretching like fingers reaching for something we had all lost. It was in the way Amir's shoulders sagged, the defiance drained from him, and in the way Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the vulnerability crackling like static in the air. Time twisted around us, like a ghost dancing just out of reach. I remember the old clock tower in the distance, its hands ticking away, counting down to something inevitable. The clash of cultures wasn't just a reckless battle, it was a slow, relentless tide, washing over each of us, erasing our histories, our identities. It was the fear of being misunderstood, the longing for acceptance, the heartache of seeing your world crumbling around you. Their voices rose and fell like the tide, and I could feel the collective heartbeat of the crowd, a symphony of anger and sadness. I thought of the dreams we carried, how they entangled us, how they both united and divided. In that moment, I felt the cosmos watching, stars blinking with a knowing sadness, caught in a dance as ancient as time itself. I remember the girl, still standing there, lost in the chaos, her small hand trembling. She had watched the confrontation unfold, eyes wide, innocent splitting at the seams. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the storm brewing around us, but I was also paralyzed, trapped in the shards of reality that cut deep. Her gaze flickered between Amir and Clara, confusion etched across her soft features, an embodiment of the future we were all fighting for, yet threatening to destroy. In that frozen moment, the world held its breath, and the clash of cultures reverberated through the very fabric of our existence. The hostility, the misunderstandings, the heartbreak, it all loomed like a shadow over us, a darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. I wished for a way to bridge the chasm, to weave a thread of understanding between them, to show that we are all flawed, all beautiful in our chaos. But the clash echoed on, relentless, refusing to cease, the night deepening, the stars flashing in silent testimony. And as I stood there, caught in the spiral of emotions, I felt the pulse of something vast and ungraspable, a cosmic rhythm that echoed our shared humanity, an unyielding, aching hope that perhaps, just perhaps, we could learn to hold each other's pain without turning it into a weapon. Because in the end, we were all just trying to survive, to love, to be understood amidst the cacophony of misunderstanding, the hostility that ripped at our souls. The clock continued its relentless ticking, each second drawing us closer to a confrontation that felt inevitable. The air pulsed with something electric, a tension that promised an explosion, a reckoning where all our stories would collide, where misunderstandings would either break us or bind us anew. And in that moment, I understood, we were all caught in a web of culture, history, pain, and longing, each heartbeat a whisper urging us to find a way through the dark. The air is thick, a palpable tension wrapped in the scent of gunpowder and blood. I hear it before I see it, the low, tremulous sound of distant explosions, like the heartbeat of a monster lurking just beyond the horizon. It feels as if the earth itself is being torn apart. I stand knee-deep in mud, my boots sinking into the viscous darkness, each step a reminder of the weight I carry, not just of my gear, but of the memories clinging to me like the fog that cloaks the battlefield. The sky is bruised, an angry shade of grey, echoing the turmoil within me. "Stay close," whispers Private Samuels, his voice barely cutting through the cacophony. His eyes are wide, darting like a trapped animal. Samuels is just a kid. 19, maybe 20, yet he wears fear like an old coat, frayed at the edges. I remember his laugh, bright and carefree back at the base, before the world turned dark. He was always talking about going home, about his little sister, about how he'd teach her to ride a bike. But now, with shadows wrapping around us, that laughter seems like a distant echo, an illusion fading into the chaos. Next to him, Sergeant Collins stands tall, a granite statue battered by the storm. The weight of his years in combat hangs on his shoulders, carved into the lines of his weathered face. He clenches his jaw, the muscles twitching like coiled springs. I remember him telling me once, "You carry your brothers with you, even when they fall." His eyes flicker toward the horizon, where a plume of smoke rises, a tombstone for dreams extinguished. There is pain in his gaze, a ghost that lingers long after the bodies are buried. I wonder who haunts him, who he carries. The rumble of artillery erupts again, closer this time, a shuddering roar that rattles my bones. I watch as a distant figure stumbles, a silhouette swallowed by the murky haze. "Medic!" The cry pierces through the noise, and adrenaline surges through me, igniting a primal instinct. I drop the weight of my fear. I know I need to move, to act, but it feels like wading through molasses. Each heartbeat ticks louder in my ears, thump, 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 like a clock counting down to my own end. Stay put. Collins barks, but his voice is drowned out by a symphony of chaos. I don't know if it's bravery or madness that propels me forward, but the urge to help overrides the storm of dread swirling in my gut. I hear Samuel's voice, pleading, trembling, "Don't go." No. But I'm already in motion, pulling away from the safety of our small group, drawn to the fallen figure like a moth to a flame. As I reach the soldier, I trip over a tangle of exposed roots, falling hard into the dirt. I feel the impact in my bones, a reminder of my own fragility amid this relentless violence. I scramble back to my feet, heart pounding, breath ragged. The soldier's face is a mask of pain, eyes flickering, life slipping through his fingers. In that moment, I see the reflection of my own fear. What if that's me one day? The thought grips me, a vice around my throat. Hold on, hold on. I plead, though my voice shakes. Blood seeps through my fingers as I try to apply pressure. Everything becomes a blur, the screams, the shadows, the acrid scent of smoke. I remember a time when I thought courage meant charging into battle, but now it feels like standing in the face of a hurricane, knowing it could tear me apart. I look into the soldier's eyes, searching for something, hope, maybe. But all I find is the void, an emptiness that clings to me like a second skin. Suddenly, the world explodes. A deafening blast rattles my skull, throwing me backward. I land in a heap, the air knocked from my lungs as darkness closes in around me. I gasp, drawing in the taste of dirt, the metallic tang of blood mingling with the bitterness of fear. I'm alive, but the soldier, he's gone. Collins yanks me back, his grip iron around my arm. Get up, he shouts, rage and fear entwined in his voice. I stagger, disoriented, the ground still spinning beneath me. I see Samuel standing, frozen, terror etched across his face. It's not right, he screams, but his words are swallowed by the relentless roar of battle. We retreat, stumbling back to our unit, but I feel the weight of that moment linger, a ghost whispering in my ear, telling me I'll carry this with me forever. The battlefield is a relentless teacher, and today's lesson is carved in agony. I glance at Collins, who looks hollow, as if the weight of loss has stripped him of everything but duty. I want to reach out, to tell him that the pain is shared, but the look in his eyes stops me cold. We are all ghosts now, haunted by the lives we couldn't save. As we regroup, the darkness of the day stretches like the shadows of fallen soldiers. Each face around me holds a story, a wound that runs deeper than any physical scar. I can feel the weight of their grief pressing down, a blanket thick with unspoken words, memories etched in blood. I remember, I whisper, but the words feel too small against the enormity of what we've just witnessed. The sky darkens, and I can't shake the feeling that we're just pawns in some cosmic game, moving across a board stained with fear and loss. I want to scream, to rage against the world that allows this, but silence settles over us like a shroud. We stand together, battered and broken, yet bound by something deeper than fear, an unyielding connection forged in the firestorm of combat. The reality of combat isn't just brutality, it's trauma that seeps into your soul, defining who you are long after the guns fall silent. I can't escape it. I can't escape the echo of that soldier's eyes, the weight of lives lost hanging heavy in the air. I know this moment will linger, the memory stitched into the fabric of my being, an indelible mark that time cannot erase. The night stretches on, a dark tapestry woven with grief and resilience, and as I look at Collins and Samuel's, I understand. We are the survivors, the living shadows of a battlefield that never truly ends. Each heartbeat reverberates with the promise of tomorrow, yet the ghosts of today linger, forever entwined with our fate. The clock strikes 11, and the sound reverberates through the dimly lit room, a haunting echo that seems to drag time itself along with it. Outside, the city sleeps beneath a blanket of indifference, where shadows flicker like memories not quite grasped. In the far corner, Clara stands, her heart thundering against her ribcage, a caged bird desperate for flight. The air hangs heavy, thick with unspoken words and bottled rage, a silent scream waiting for release. I remember the first time I felt invisible, she whispers, her voice barely breaking the silence, her eyes darting to the door, half expecting someone to burst in and silence her once again. It was like walking through a dream where everyone could see through me, into some abyss where I was nothing. Just a ghost haunting my own life. Across the room, Jonathan lounges on the worn couch, legs splayed, the very picture of careless masculinity. He grins, but it doesn't reach his eyes, those stormy blue depths that hide secrets she will never know. A man molded by expectations, a puppet on strings he never wanted to sever. Clara, you worry too much. Just keep your head down. That's what it means to survive, he quips, his words dripping with a condescending lightness that makes her clench her fists. He doesn't see her, never has. But oh, how she longs to scream, to shake him awake from this complacent slumber. You don't get it, do you? She fires back, her voice rising, the tension coiling tighter around them like a noose. You don't understand what it means to be a woman in this world, where every day is a war, and every smile is a mask. She dares to take a step forward, a heartbeat of defiance fueling her courage. Then there's MIA, perched on the windowsill, staring blankly into the dark. I remember the first time I was told I wasn't enough, she murmurs, her tone almost ethereal, as if she's channeling the ghosts of women before her. I was 7, and I wore the wrong dress. I remember the laughter, the way it sliced through me, like glass. I spent years trying to fit into a mold that was never made for me. Her fingers trace the outline of the glass, and in that moment, the city lights outside flicker, an unholy dance of flickering hope and despair. Clara's heart aches for her. MIA, you are enough. More than enough. But the world doesn't want to see us. Each syllable is a thread woven into the fabric of their shared struggle, binding them tighter, a lifeline in a sea of darkness. You think if we scream loud enough, they'll hear us. Mia's eyes shimmer with unshed tears, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Or will they just drown us out with their laughter? Jonathan chuckles, a hollow sound that echoes through the room. You two are letting it get to your heads. Women have always been good at playing the victim. The words hang in the air, a vicious jab that sends Clara reeling. This man, this boy who knows nothing of the burden they carry, who thinks bravery is the absence of fear. She wants to shout at him, to rip apart the fragile facade he wears like a shield. But instead, she feels the weight of his ignorance pressing down, suffocating. I remember every time I was silenced, Clara says, her voice a low growl, anger bubbling beneath her skin. Every time I walked into a room and felt the atmosphere shift, the judgment burning like a brand. I am done being quiet. MIA nods, her gaze sharp, a flicker of fire igniting in her soul. And I won't be anyone's ghost. Not anymore. We will not be erased. The words are a spell, a promise that wraps around them, binding their fates together in a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. The clock ticks steadily, every second a reminder that time is against them. The air thickens, heavy with unspoken truths, as they stand on the precipice of something monumental. Clara takes a deep breath, the unyielding strength of countless women swelling within her. It's time to break the silence. To shatter the glass that holds us captive. With each word, the walls around them tremble, the city outside oblivious to the revolution brewing within this small room. The shadows grow restless, whispering tales of defiance, of women who stood tall despite the weight of centuries pushing down upon them. Clara feels their presence, a warm embrace that steals her breath. Jonathan shifts, unease washing over him. You're just being dramatic. It's not like the world is going to change because you decide to speak up. But Clara, oh, she is a tempest, and she won't allow anyone to strip her of her power. No, Jonathan. It's not about the world changing for us. It's about us changing the world. Her voice rises, fierce, echoing off the walls, filling the cracks of doubt that once held her hostage. MIA, emboldened by Clara's fire, joins in, her spirit igniting. Every word becomes a weapon. Every voice a rallying cry. We are not just whispers anymore, we are a chorus, and we will not be silenced. The tension in the room snaps, a taut string finally breaking, and in that moment, Clara knows that they are not alone. There are women everywhere, in every corner of the world, their stories intertwining like a tapestry of struggle and resilience. The shadows dance around her, a silent audience to the battle raging within. As the clock ticks on, the world outside remains unaware of the storm brewing within these walls, a reckoning, a challenge to the status quo. It is a moment suspended in time, a heartbeat that reverberates with promise and peril. And as Clara, MIA, and Jonathan stand on the brink of transformation, they become more than just individuals, they embody the fight of every woman who has ever dared to stand up, to be heard. The echoes of their words linger in the air, a haunting melody that teases the edge of consciousness, a promise that the silence will break, that the struggle will continue, and that this is only the beginning. The dawn is coming, and with it, a new era where women will take their rightful place, no longer hidden in the shadows, but standing strong in the light. The air hangs like a heavy blanket, thick and suffocating. A distant rumble rolls across the city, not the kind that promises rain but the kind that knows only chaos. I remember the sound of shattered glass, sharp like a scream cutting through the silence. I remember the taste of dust, gritty and metallic, as it settled on my tongue. The world around me is collapsing, yet here I stand, paralyzed, caught in the moment when everything changes. A little girl, no more than 6, clutches a worn teddy bear to her chest. Its button eyes glimmer with the last remnants of innocence. She looks up at me, wide-eyed, as if trying to understand this new reality where shadows grow long and laughter is a memory. Her name is Layla. I remember her voice like the gentle tinkling of wind chimes, a sound that used to be so pure. Now, it's buried beneath an avalanche of fear. "Where's my mama?" Her question pierces through the cacophony of sirens and distant explosions, an echo of a million lost voices. I reach for her, my fingers trembling. "We'll find her, I promise," but my words feel like ashes in my mouth. I want to believe, but the weight of the world presses down, suffocating hope. Layla's eyes are pools of despair, and I see flickers of something more, something I can't name, something that clings to the edges of memory. Across the street, Malik watches from behind a crumbling wall, his face lined with worry and guilt. He's a father, a husband, but his children are miles away, buried under a roof that might not stand the night. He clutches a tattered map, a futile attempt to navigate through the chaos. I see the flicker of a decision in his eyes, a silent plea for courage that he's been too proud to voice. His heart beats loudly, a rhythmic reminder of everything he has to lose. "Malik!" I shout, but my voice is swallowed by the roar of the world shattering. He looks at me, and in that shared glance, I feel the weight of his choices. The need to protect. The necessity of survival. "Is it safe?" he asks, the question hanging heavy between us. I want to lie, to tell him that the streets ahead are clear, that the horizon isn't painted with the colors of war. But I can't. Instead, we move together, side by side, navigating the wreckage of our lives, each step echoing the heartbeat of the chaos around us. I remember the way the sky used to stretch endlessly above us, a canvas painted with dreams. Now, it's smeared with smoke and despair. The sun tries to pierce through the veil of ash, but it's a futile attempt, like hope trying to survive in a world hell-bent on extinguishing it. The buildings stand tall, but their hearts have been hollowed out, and the streets are lined with ghosts, whispers of the family dinners that once filled our homes with laughter. Layla tugs at my sleeve, her tiny fingers wrapped around newfound courage. "Is this a game?" she asks, her innocence a stubborn flame flickering against the darkness. "Are we playing hide and seek?" Her voice is a melody clashing against the discord, and I want to laugh and cry all at once. "Yes, Layla," I say, forcing a smile, though it feels like a mask slipping down my face. "But we have to find your mama first." Each word is a fragile thread holding our reality together, and I feel it fraying under the pressure of the silence that screams for attention. Malik moves ahead, peering into the shadows as if the answers lie hidden there. I can see the conflict tearing at him, a father's instinct battling against the reality of a world gone mad. "I have to find them," he murmurs, and I know he feels the weight of 1,000 lifetimes resting on his shoulders. The flicker of hope he carries is almost palpable, but so is the fear that it might extinguish in an instant, snuffed out by the violence that surrounds us. As we traverse the rubble, each step is a testament to our shared resolve. The air is thick with the acrid smell of smoke mingling with the sweetness of burnt dreams. I can hear the distant wails of sirens, each one a reminder of the lives lost, lives like Layla's mother, who might be waiting somewhere in the chaos. "Do you think the stars are watching?" Layla asks suddenly, her eyes turning upward, seeking solace in the vastness above. The night sky holds an eerie beauty, a reminder of the worlds beyond our own, yet here, in this moment, the stars feel like cruel jesters, twinkling while chaos reigns below. I hope so, I reply, the words tasting bitter. I hope they remember us. We come upon a burnt-out vehicle, charred remnants of what was once a family's lifeline. The contours of the metal twist and dance in the fading light, casting long, haunting shadows. Malik steps back, his breath catching as he scans the debris, searching for any sign of life, any flicker of warmth amidst the cold. I reach for Layla, pulling her close as we both stand in the wake of destruction. I can feel her small heart pounding against mine, each beat a reminder of everything we stand to lose. There's a thrum of desperation in the air, vibrating through our bones, eclipsing thoughts of tomorrow. Is it wrong to hope? Layla whispers, the question hanging in the air like a fragile thread. No, I say, the conviction rising with each syllable. It's the only thing we have left. But hope feels like a cruel trick, a ghost of a promise lost in a world of shadows. As night falls, the darkness swallows us whole, the only light flickering in our hands, illuminating the path forward, fragile and fraught with danger. Malik's face is etched with resolve, but I can see the cracks forming, the fear seeping through. The ghosts of the past linger in our minds, whispering tales of choices made and lives sacrificed. I feel the weight of history pressing down, the echoes of those who have walked this path before us, and I wonder if we're destined to repeat their mistakes. But then there's Layla, her tiny hand gripping mine, grounding me, reminding me that even in the darkest of nights, there exists the spark of something worthy of love, of family, of a future that might still hold promise. Together, I murmur, and as we begin to walk again, I know this moment is only the beginning. The world around us may be engulfed in flames, but the fire within us, our shared hope, our undeniable bond, remains unquenchable. And as we step into the unknown, I realize that we are not just surviving, we are fighting for something more. For each other. For the innocent. For the untold stories that deserve to be heard. But the night is long, and the shadows stretch before us, hinting at the battles yet to come. And in that uncertainty, we press on, heartbeats echoing through the darkness, a promise of resilience in a world desperate for light. The air hung heavy with a chilling stillness, a silence that screamed louder than the clash of swords. I could feel the pulse of the night thrumming through my veins, a rhythmic reminder that everything we held dear was teetering on the edge of a knife. Shadows danced in the flickering torchlight, grotesque figures twisting across the cobblestones like memories. I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, trapped in a moment that would shatter everything I believed in. It was the kind of night that promised betrayal, thick with the scent of wet earth and the metallic tang of fear. Across the courtyard, Alizia stood, her emerald eyes blazing with a mixture of defiance and despair. She was the kind of woman who could command a room with a single glance, but tonight, she felt more like a ghost. I remembered the way she had laughed, the sound bright and infectious, echoing against stone walls. Now, it was swallowed by the darkness, leaving only the hollow remnants of trust. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, words trembling on the cusp of trembling lips, a plea, a warning, a confession all at once. Her fingers brushed the hilt of her sword, a futile reassurance that did little to mask the chaos inside. Behind her, a figure emerged from the shadows, Sir Cedric, the noble knight I had once called a friend. His armor gleamed in the dim light, a facade of honor, concealing the rot beneath. I had admired his valor, his unwavering commitment to the code of chivalry, but that man was a stranger now, replaced by a cold, calculating monster who had sacrificed everything for power. "Alizia," he said, voice smooth as silk but laced with venom, "you're in over your head." The word slithered through the air, coiling around my throat like a noose. Heart racing, I wanted to shout, to scream my loyalty to the woman who had once filled my life with laughter. But the truth, raw and painful, twisted in my gut. I felt the weight of my own betrayal. I had trusted Cedric, had believed in his vision, and now, that trust lay in ruins, trampled by the weight of ambition. The code we had lived by crumbled, leaving only wreckage in its wake. I remember the day we pledged our swords to each other, I murmured, fighting back the flood of memories, sunlight pouring over us like honey, the laughter of children echoing in the background as we trained in the yard. But now, the past felt like a curse, a shackle binding me to a man who had traded honor for ambition. Was it all a lie? Alizia's gaze flickered to mine, and in that brief moment, I saw the flickering of hope buried beneath layers of hurt. She stepped forward, her voice steady. We are not pawns in his game. We have the power to choose. But the fear in her eyes reflected the reality we faced. Betrayal was a cold wind, cutting through the warmth of our shared memories, leaving nothing but icy despair. Cedric laughed, a sound devoid of joy, echoing against the stone walls, a cruel mockery of our past. Choose? You speak of choice as if it holds any weight in a world fueled by greed. You think you can stand against me? You think your romantic notions of honor mean anything? His words sliced through the air, sharp and merciless, leaving behind a trail of devastation. And yet, in that moment, I felt something awaken within me, a flicker of defiance igniting like a spark in the darkness. I remembered the countless nights we had spent under the stars, dreaming of a future where loyalty meant something, where trust was not a weapon to wield. I would rather fight and fail than be a pawn in your twisted game, Cedric, I shouted, the words bursting forth like fire, each syllable a declaration of war. Alizia nodded, her spirit rekindled, a fierce flame in the night. You have lost your way, Cedric. This is not the chivalry you once claimed to uphold. Her voice rang clear, cutting through the murky depths of betrayal. The air crackled with tension, a silent promise that even in the face of despair, we would not back down. Time seemed to stretch, the heartbeat of the night amplifying the weight of our choices. In the shadows, I caught sight of the glint of steel, a dagger hidden beneath Cedric's cloak, a symbol of the treachery that lay ahead. I felt a chill creep down my spine as I realized that betrayal often wore a familiar face, and the ones we trusted the most could become the very instruments of our destruction. Do it, I dared him, my voice steady, echoing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. If you think betrayal will silence us, you are mistaken. The challenge hung in the air, thick as fog, heavy with the promise of conflict. Alizia stood beside me, her resolve like a shield, and I knew in that moment that we were no longer alone. Cedric's face twisted in rage, but beneath it lay a flicker of uncertainty. For a heartbeat, I saw a man battling his own demons, a knight trapped in a web of ambition and deceit. But the moment passed, replaced by the cold glint of danger in his eyes. You will regret this, he hissed, fury lacing his voice, a predator cornering its prey. But as the tension hung thick in the air, I remembered the stories of old, knights who had fought for honor, for love, and for the very essence of trust. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, the countless souls who had walked this path before, and I knew we would stand firm, together against the tide of betrayal. In that instant, time fragmented, memories swirling like leaves caught in the wind. I could see the shadows of our past, the laughter, the camaraderie, but also the cracks that had formed, the whispers of treachery that had gone unnoticed until now. Together, I whispered to Alizia, gripping her hand, the warmth of her presence a beacon in the darkness. Together, she echoed, and in that simple word, I felt the power of our bond, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, we would forge our own path. We were not mere characters in Cedric's game, we were the architects of our destiny, and no amount of betrayal would extinguish the fire of our resolve. The winds howled around us, a prelude to the storm that was brewing, but within that chaos, we stood united, ready to face whatever darkness loomed ahead. The moon hangs low, a sallow eye watching over the blood-soaked earth. I remember the silence that night, a thick, suffocating void filled with the distant echoes of clashing steel. It's a sound I can never quite forget, like a grotesque lullaby that haunts my waking hours. I stand amidst the ruin, my hands trembling, clutching the hilt of a sword stained with too much life. Beside me, Elias, his face a mask of exhaustion and desperation, stares into nothing, his eyes hollow and lost, as if the very soul has been drained from him. The weight of his burden presses down on us both, a darkness that feels as tangible as the cold steel we wield. "Do you hear that?" he whispers. A shiver runs through me. It's not the wind that chills my bones but the spectre of the men we've killed. I see their faces in the shadows, eyes wide in confusion, mouths open in screams that never quite escape. I hear them, I say. I can't tell if he means the ghosts or the memories that claw at the edges of our sanity. Each death we've witnessed etches itself into our minds, replaying in vivid detail, a haunting carousel that spins faster with every battle. In the haze of war, I'd thought I'd found purpose. Crusade, what a glorious word! A noble cause wrapped in the banners of righteousness. But beneath that gilded surface lies a festering rot, a wound that won't heal. It gnaws at us, turning our valor into a grotesque mockery of itself. I remember when I first held a sword, the thrill of it pulsing through my veins like fire. It was a promise of glory. Now? Now it feels like a curse. Elias collapses, knees hitting the ground, and I want to reach out, to pull him back from the precipice, but my arms feel leaden. I remember when his laughter boomed like thunder, vibrant and infectious, shattering the gloom. He was the light in our encampment, the one who made jokes about the stench of our unwashed bodies, a bouquet of peasants, he'd called it. But that was before the cities turned to ashes, before the cries of the dying became our lullabies. "Why do we keep fighting?" he gasps, eyes glassy as they scan the desolation around us. "There's nothing left, just death." I want to tell him it's for honor, for God, for something greater than ourselves. But those words feel like stones in my mouth, heavy and suffocating. Instead, I kneel beside him, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "We have to," I say, though I'm not sure who I'm trying to convince. "We owe it to them." I wave my hand at the shadows flickering in the corners of my mind, the fallen brothers, the lost hopes, the screams that linger like smoke. He shakes his head, mad with despair. "Oh? What do we owe? We're the executioners of our own humanity." The truth leaches into the air, thick and acrid, suffocating in its honesty. I remember his brother, lost to the chaos of a charge gone wrong, his body left behind like a discarded husk. I remember the day we buried him, or rather, tried to bury the ghosts that followed us after. "Do you remember the time we stole that pig?" I say, desperately grasping for light amid the encroaching shadows. "You were so proud, shoving it into your tunic like you'd just won a tournament." Elias gives a weak laugh, but it's tinged with pain. "And then I dropped it, and it squealed like a banshee. I thought the whole camp would die laughing." The memory flickers, a brief reprieve from the darkness. But it fades too quickly, leaving us in the oppressive gloom once more. I can feel the pressure building inside me, an explosion of emotions ready to burst forth. "We can't let them win," I say, though I'm not sure who they are anymore. The enemy? The despair? The creeping madness that knows our names? I grip the sword tighter, knuckles white, as if I can crush the weight of this torment into submission. "Win?" Elias whispers, his voice barely a tremor. "What does winning even mean?" "We're losing ourselves." He looks up at me, and for a moment, I see the boy he used to be, or the boy who believed in legends, in chivalry, in the sanctity of life. What do we have left to fight for? I want to scream, to rage against the universe that brought us to this hell, this battlefield where valor has turned to ashes and dreams are nothing but mirages in the desert of our souls. Instead, I find myself staring into the desolate horizon, the sun dipping below the edge of forever. The air is thick with the scent of blood and fear, and I realize I am drowning. Drowning in memories of laughter turned to sobs, of hope suffocated beneath the weight of despair. I reach for Elias, clasping his shoulder as though to tether him to this fleeting moment of clarity. "We have to remember," I say, voice unsteady. "We have to remember what it was like to live." But even as I say it, I can feel the creeping tendrils of madness wrapping around my mind, whispering sweet lies, promising solace in oblivion. I see figures in the twilight, shadows of the fallen, their faces twisted in eternal agony, and I can't help but wonder if they know peace. Elias looks away, gaze lost in the darkening sky, and I know the battle is not just with swords but within ourselves. The real enemy is the unrelenting tide of despair, the slow, insidious erosion of our very beings. A clock ticks loudly in my mind, counting down the moments until the next fight, the next loss. You know, I say, heart-pounding, sometimes I think about just leaving it all behind. Running far away to a quiet place where no one knows our names. His eyes flicker with something akin to gratitude, or is it fear? But if we go, who will remember them? The silence stretches, heavy with the weight of our shared anguish. Maybe that's the point, I whisper, feeling the darkness pressing in, threatening to consume us whole. I remember the sound of the battle horn, echoing in the distance. I know we'll have to rise again, to take up the weight of our sins and continue the fight. It's a cruel, unyielding cycle, one that eats away at our hearts, leaving us hollow, yet we cling to the remnants of our humanity, hoping for a flicker of light in this oppressive night. But as the moon watches over us, I wonder if we are already ghosts, wandering the echoes of a life once lived, forever haunted by the choices we've made. The night hung heavy, an oppressive darkness cloaking the camp like a funeral shroud. I remember the distant sound of a horn, eerie and unyielding, slicing through the air, a harbinger of despair. It echoed against the walls of Jerusalem, where shadows danced like guilty ghosts, and hearts beat with the frantic rhythm of impending doom. The Crusaders, those weary souls, now found themselves on the precipice of failure, led by commanders who wore their arrogance like armor. I stood there, my breath caught in my throat, as I watched Godfrey of Bouillon pacing back and forth, his brow furrowed like the furrows of a plowed field, each crease a testament to the weight of his decisions. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched the hilt of his sword, a weapon once bright and full of purpose, now dulled by inaction. I could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the gnawing fear that maybe this was not the path ordained by heaven but a darkened trail leading to ruin. Behind him, Raymond IV of Toulouse loomed like a tempest, his voice rising above the murmur of the anxious soldiers. "We march at dawn. Let them tremble before us," he shouted, the fervor of his conviction burning bright, yet it felt hollow, like a candle flickering in the face of a storm. I could sense the desperation in his tone, tinged with a madness that only a leader on the verge of losing everything could understand. His dreams of glory were tangled in the webs of ambition, and I wondered how long before the thread snapped. But then, there was Baldwin IV, the leper king, whose very existence was a battle against the ravages of his own body, a living testament to the cruelty of fate. He sat there, regal despite his affliction, his eyes aflame with a fierce intelligence. "You are lost in your anger, Raymond," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the chaos. "Listen to the whispers of the wind. It knows more than we do." He paused, his gaze piercing, as if he could see into the very souls of his commanders. "This is not just about conquest. It's about survival." I remember the silence that followed, thick and suffocating. The soldiers exchanged glances, their faces etched with confusion, fear, and a desperate longing for direction. In that moment, I felt the crushing weight of leadership, the pressure to inspire when hope was but a flickering ember. The burden of expectation pressed down upon them like a shroud. And yet, in the face of impending annihilation, they were stalemated by their own flaws. Survival. Raymond spat, his frustration boiling over. "We are not here to survive, we are here to claim what is ours." The fire within him was intoxicating, yet it blindsided him, igniting a blind fury that could lead them to destruction. I felt the tension crackle, like electricity in the air. A confrontation hovered just out of reach, the unspoken battles of egos threatening to erupt. Godfrey, caught in the crossfire of two worlds, shifted uneasily. "Raymond, heed the king. We cannot afford to fracture our ranks." His voice wavered, as if the very act of defending Baldwin was a gamble on his own fate. I could see the ghost of doubt, the flickering worry that maybe this fractured leadership was their doom. The way his fingers gripped the sword spoke volumes, a desperate quest for strength, a search for clarity. Then came the whispers, ghostly remnants of the past, echoing through the night. Fleeting memories of battles lost and won, of men who had marched proudly into the fray only to be swallowed by the darkness. The cries of fallen warriors echoed deep within me, and I felt my heart ache for the inevitable loss. Time was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand, and with each passing moment, the spectre of failure loomed larger. The air thickened with an unspoken tension, a palpable anxiety that coiled around us, suffocating and intoxicating. Each breath felt like a prelude to disaster. The soldiers, once vibrant with hope, now moved like shadows, haunted by fear, caught between the shimmering dreams of conquest and the stark reality of their failing leadership. And then, it happened. A distant rumble, thunder, or the sound of 1,000 feet marching. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage like a caged beast. The moment had arrived. In that instant, all our hopes and dreams clashed with the relentless reality of war. I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue, feel the adrenaline surge through my veins as the very fabric of our purpose unraveled before us. The commanders stood paralyzed, caught in the whirlwind of their own ambitions and insecurities. "What do we do?" a young soldier whispered, his voice trembling like leaves in a storm. The question hung in the air, a specter of uncertainty that threatened to consume them all. The leaders exchanged glances, and I could feel the weight of their choices, heavy and leaden, constricting their throats. I wanted to scream, to shake them awake from this nightmare, to show them the consequences of their arrogance. I wanted to shout that they were not gods but frail, flawed men, and every decision mattered, every choice could lead to salvation or ruin. And as dawn broke over Jerusalem, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, I felt the pulse of inevitability throbbing within me. The first steps of the march began, a slow, agonizing procession toward an uncertain fate. The battle would commence, not just against the enemy but against the shadows of their own failures, their own hubris. In that moment of liminality, I stood still, paralyzed by the weight of it all, the cries of the past echoing in my ears as the sun rose. This was their crucible, and the ghosts of decision loomed large, waiting patiently for the day when the true impact of leadership would be laid bare in the blood-soaked sands of history. The canvas of conflict was being painted anew, and I could only wonder how it would unfold, a tapestry woven with threads of ambition, betrayal, and the haunting silence that follows a commander's failure. The night lingered still, but the battle had begun. Every heartbeat became a countdown, one that promised glory, but also whispered of the darkness lurking just beyond the horizon. Chapter 13. The aftermath of victory, consequences of conquest. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Shadows flickered against the crumbling stone walls, whispering tales of destruction as the last cries of the fallen echoed into silence. I stood amidst the wreckage, a battlefield strewn with the remnants of a victory that felt more like a funeral. My heart thudded, an unrelenting drumbeat of despair echoing in my ears. I was not alone. Just a few paces away, Elara knelt, her fingers brushing over the lifeless hand of her brother, a boy who had once laughed at the stars and dreamed of becoming a knight. She sobbed, a broken sound that tore through me, igniting a fire in my chest. "I remember," she gasped, "the stories he told me. The knights, the glories, but now, those tales lay buried in the dirt, swallowed by the earth, and I wondered if she'd ever be free of the chains of her memories." Then there was Selim, his face smeared with soot and grief, eyes wide yet hollow, a man forged in the fires of conflict, yet now unable to recognize the villain reflected in his own skin. "We did this," he murmured, as if the words themselves would shatter the world around us. "We took their land, their lives. What have we become?" My heart twisted, caught in the vice of his remorse. He had always been the bravest among us, a warrior whose courage was only rivaled by his fierce desire to protect. But now, victory tasted like ashes, and I could feel the weight of his guilt pressing down on me like a shroud. I remember the days leading up to our triumph, a cacophony of laughter and camaraderie, the thrill of battle like a drug coursing through our veins. But we were naive, blinded by the allure of glory. The cheers of victory now felt like mockery, taunting us with the hollow ache of what we had sacrificed. Each fallen soldier was a ghost haunting the periphery of our minds, their faces flashing before us, silent witnesses to our sins. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms. I felt the weight of time slipping through my fingers, a relentless clock ticking down to our reckoning. Elara wiped her tears, turning to me, her eyes glistening with a defiance that shocked me. "We cannot let their deaths be in vain," she declared, her voice a fierce whisper. We must honor them, not with words, but with actions. But what actions, I wondered? What could we possibly offer to those who would never walk among us again? Through the haze, I caught sight of the standard we had raised in victory, tattered and stained, a mockery of our triumph. It fluttered in the wind, a cruel reminder that every conquest bore the weight of 1,000 souls. I could almost hear their cries, a haunting serenade that wrapped around me like a noose. Selim, I called, my voice trembling with the urgency of unshed tears, what do we do now? Can we ever atone for this? He looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of hope sparked in his eyes. We find a way, together, he said, though I could see the doubt lurking just beneath the surface. Together? Could we even stand side by side when our hearts were so fractured? I turned away, needing to escape the scrutiny of their grief. The world around me felt unreal, like a twisted dream that refused to release its grip. I stumbled through the debris, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Each step felt like a betrayal, an act of violence against the memories we had forged in the fires of camaraderie. As night enveloped the battlefield, I felt the weight of darkness pressing down, a palpable force that encased us in its bitter embrace. The distant howl of wolves echoed through the stillness, a reminder that life continued, even in death's shadow. I remembered sitting by the fire on colder nights, our laughter mingling with the crackling flames, dreaming of a future unfettered by blood. Those dreams now felt like a cruel farce, an illusion shattered by the harsh reality of our actions. The stars blinked down, indifferent to our suffering, casting a cold light that felt like judgment. I looked up, searching for answers among the constellations, but all I found was the void, an abyss that mirrored the emptiness within me. I wanted to scream, to tear at the fabric of the universe for the injustice of it all. I wanted to hope, to hold on to the fragile threads of redemption, but the weight of despair pressed down on me like a stone. Then, a sudden rustle broke the silence, a shift in the air that sent chills racing down my spine. From the shadows emerged a figure, cloaked in darkness, bearing the weight of the world on their shoulders. My heart quickened, pounding like a war drum, as they stepped into the light. It was a face I recognized, though I could hardly believe it. A ghost returned from the beyond, a reminder that even in the aftermath of victory, we were never truly alone. "Look at what you've done," the figure said, voice low yet resonant, sending shivers skittering across my skin. "You've sown the seeds of regret, and they will grow like weeds in your mind." In that moment, I understood, our victory had birthed a new war, one fought within our souls, a battle that would rage on long after the dust settled and the echoes of the past faded. Elara and Selim stood beside me, and together we faced the spectre of our choices, an uneasy truce forged in the fires of our shared grief. I remember thinking, is this the cost of conquest? To live forever under the weight of our decisions, haunted by the ghosts of those we have lost. And as the shadows deepened, I knew we were bound together, not just by bloodshed, but by the promise that even in the darkest moments, there was still a flicker of hope, a chance for redemption hidden within our own fractured hearts. The night stretched on, heavy with the echoes of the past, and I could feel the threads of our stories intertwining, each heartbeat a reminder that we were all still here, alive in the wake of our own destruction. The battle may have ended, but our fight had just begun. The air crackles with tension, thick as blood, wrapping around the throats of the few who remain. Everything is quiet, too quiet, save for the distant clamor of steel on steel, the cries of the wounded weaving through the shadows like ghosts. And then, a solitary figure, Zara, stands at the edge of the forest, heart racing, breath shallow. Her fingers tremble against the rough bark of the gnarled tree. This knot of wood is her only ally as she watches the chaos unfold. She is not a soldier, she is a healer. But today, standing between her people and the encroaching nightmare, she feels like an unwilling warrior. I remember when the nights were filled with laughter, she thinks, clenching her jaw. Now, they are haunted by screams. The memories of her childhood are ghostly, flickering like shadows at dusk, but they're drowned out by the present horror, the cruel clash of swords, the guttural cries of men fighting for their homes, their lives. And there, amidst this storm of fury, stands Elias, her brother, a flickering flame of defiance. He grips a makeshift spear, eyes burning with a fierce light, reminding her of the sun rising over the hills, promising warmth and hope. But today, hope feels like a distant star, just out of reach. I refuse to let them take what's ours, he had sworn, and those words echo like an incantation. Each syllable a pledge, a vow carved into his soul. But what is bravery without fear? In the darkness of his heart, Elias wrestles with doubt, gnawing at him like a ravenous beast. What if I can't protect her? What if today is the end? His fingers tighten around the spear, slick with sweat and trepidation. The smell of earth is intoxicating, the sharp tang of fear mingling with the scent of damp soil. The battlefield is both a home and a prison, familiar yet foreign, a paradox that threatens to consume him. He looks back at Zara, her face a haunting mask of resolve and fragility. You can't, she had screamed earlier, hands gripping his shoulders, grounding him. We need you alive. You're all we have. But those pleas feel like a weight on his chest now, a curse he can't shake off. He wants to fight. He wants to protect. Yet, the spectre of loss hovers over them, dark and heavy, waiting to claim its due. Zara! A voice cuts through the fog of despair. It's Amir, the village's blacksmith, his arms like tree trunks, muscles taut with urgency. He moves through the chaos with the grace of a dancer, weaving through bodies, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face. We must fall back. We can't hold them off forever. His words hang in the air, crystalline and sharp, slicing through the delusion of invincibility. But retreat? The very idea feels like poison, a betrayal of everything they stand for. Zara's heart races, pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. She glimpses the Crusaders advancing, relentless shadows fueled by greed and conviction. But what fuels her? I remember, she whispers to herself, the stories of our ancestors, their strength, their fire. Each memory a flicker of light against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, a shriek pierces the air, sharp and agonizing. Zara's breath hitches as she turns, heart plummeting. A woman, a distant neighbor, lies on the ground, clutching her stomach, blood seeping through her fingers like a cruel reminder of mortality. Instinct kicks in, and without thinking, Zara rushes forward, abandoning her own fears, her own doubts, the world around her fading into a blur. Hold on. Just hold on, she cries, urgency igniting her words, but she can feel time slipping like sand through her fingers. Elias, torn between duty and love, charges alongside her, spear raised, defiance radiating from his core. Get back, he bellows, voice hoarse and raw, desperation fueling every syllable. He holds them at bay, but each clash of metal is a reminder of their fragility. We can't let them win. With every thrust of his spear, he feels the weight of his promise, to protect his sister, their home, their very existence. A Crusader lunges forward, sword glinting like a shard of ice. Time slows, heartbeat thundering in his ears. Zara, he screams, but it's too late. The blade arcs through the air, a cruel harbinger, and in that moment, everything shifts. Memories collide, a childhood of laughter, the warmth of summer days, a bond forged in shared dreams. Love and terror entwined in an unholy dance. The impact is bone-jarring, a sickening thud echoing in his chest as he crashes to the ground, breathless. The world spins, colors fading to black and white, a dream dissolving into nightmare. No, the word escapes his lips, a whisper of anguish, but it's drowned out by the cacophony around him. The retreating roar of his spirit echoes in his head, you cannot lose her. You cannot, but Zara is there, kneeling beside him, eyes wide with fear and fury. Elias, she cries, hands trembling as she presses against the wound, warmth mingling with blood. Stay with me. You must stay with me. Her voice is a lifeline, frayed yet fierce, binding him to this moment, to this fight. And then the world narrows to the single beat of their hearts. The battlefield fades, the clamor a distant echo, leaving only the two of them, tethered by love and fear. She can feel the weight of the world pressing down on both of them, crushing. I won't let you go, she breathes, every word a thread weaving through the fabric of fate, a promise stitched into the very air they breathe. Shadows loom, Crusaders encircling them, eyes gleaming with malevolence. But there, in the eye of the storm, Zara knows the truth. They are not alone, others have risen, unsung heroes rallying in the darkness, driven by rage, by heartache, by an indomitable spark of resistance. The tide is shifting, fierce and relentless, and she can almost hear the whisper of history echoing around her. I remember, she begins, breath hitching, each word a spark igniting the fire within. I remember, the stories. The dreams. The fight is far from over. And just like that, the stage is set, the drama of defiance unfolding under the cloak of night, shadows dancing like phantoms, the spectre of hope breathing life into the chaos. The echoes of their resistance are just beginning, and the world holds its breath. The air was thick with the smell of charred wood and despair as the sun sank behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the remnants of a once thriving village. I stood there, at the heart of destruction, my heart racing like a wild stallion, echoing in the silence that enveloped us. The cries of a mother searching for her child mixed with the distant sound of clanging swords, an unholy melody that heralded the end of dreams. I remember the feeling, the weight of grief so tangible, you could almost touch it. The ruins whispered secrets, but all I could hear was the hollow thud of my own heartbeat. Adelaide, her hand shaking, clutched a tattered piece of fabric, her son's tunic, soaked in the ashes of lost hope. Her eyes, once bright with the laughter of her children, were now sunken, dark pools of her shattered reality. Each breath she took felt like a betrayal of the memories that lingered just beyond her grasp, like smoke curling away from a dying flame. "Where is he?" she wailed, her voice a raw edge in the stillness, a plea against the cosmos. Her husband, Lucien, stood beside her, a shadow of the man he once was, the noble warrior transformed into a spectre of despair. His armor, once gleaming with pride, now dulled by the weight of his own helplessness. I remember the way Lucien's fingers curled into fists, the knuckles white as he tried to contain the storm brewing inside him. "We fought for our future," he muttered, his voice low, dripping with a bitter irony that twisted like a knife in my gut. "But what future is left?" He looked at the ruins around him, at their home now reduced to rubble, and I could see the flicker of anger, like a candle flickering in a draught, struggling against the overwhelming darkness. The echoes of laughter that once filled their home lay buried beneath the ashes, and the absence pressed down like a boulder on their chests. I remember the ghost of their son, a fleeting memory that danced like a wisp of fog, and I felt it too, a sharp pang of loss that struck hard, like a thunderclap in the still air. They had sacrificed everything, given up their dreams and their peace, only to return to this desolation. The thought struck me, how easy it was to lose everything. I could almost see the dreams they had woven together like a tapestry, a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love, now reduced to frayed threads, scattered in the winds of war. The whispers of the village spoke of the Crusades, noble causes cloaked in blood and betrayal. But I saw the faces of families torn apart, homes shattered, lives extinguished. "We were promised land," Lucien said, his voice steadied with the weight of 1,000 unfulfilled aspirations. "But all we found was ruin." His eyes, once fierce and filled with the spirit of a knight, were now dulled by the relentless march of despair. Adelaide turned to him, her brows furrowing in anxiety. "And what about our daughter?" The name hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, ready to shatter. The world around them blurred, their struggles echoing through time, a narrative replayed in countless lives, each more heart-wrenching than the last. I could feel their fear, a palpable force, snaking its way into my own heart and squeezing tight, like a vice. "Maybe she is safe," Lucien whispered, but his voice trembled, a flicker of hope battling against the darkness. Yet, I felt the heaviness of every unspoken question between them, the gnawing worry that clawed at their sanity. Were they chasing phantoms in a world where the only certainty was loss? The shadows danced around us, and the night grew heavy with the weight of their grief, wrapping around them like a shroud. A flash of anger surged in Lucien, the fire of a warrior waiting to ignite. "I will not let this be our end. We are more than the sum of our losses." His fists clenched tighter, a silent vow hanging in the air like a challenge thrown to the heavens. But beneath that bravado, the fear festered. What could a man do against such insurmountable odds? The poverty that clawed at their heels was unforgiving, suffocating, their hopes dashed against rocks of despair. I remember the night sky, a blanket of stars bearing witness to their suffering, each twinkle a reminder of dreams deferred, lost to time. They were not just fighting for survival but against the crushing weight of despair, against the very essence of what it meant to be human. The darkness seeped into their souls, each moment stretching into eternity, filled with unanswered questions and unfulfilled promises. Adelaide's voice trembled, breaking through the heavy silence. What if we are no longer who we were? What if this war has changed us forever? The question cut through the air like a blade, leaving behind a chilling aftermath, a deep chasm of uncertainty. Lucien, the resolute knight, was now staring into the abyss, grappling with the very notion of identity. And there it was, the embodiment of their struggle, the financial ruin that gnawed at their very core. They had given up everything, yet the kingdom's promises felt like ashes in their mouths. The burdens they carried were heavy, impossibly so, and I could see the tendrils of hopelessness wrapping around them like an unyielding fog. I remember the chill in the air, the silent cries of every family left to navigate the aftermath of greed and ambition. Each breath felt like the last gasp of a fading hope, a reminder that every victory came at a cold, unrelenting price. The world around them was a tapestry woven with heartbreak, a cruel reminder that war does not just claim lives but leaves behind the haunting specter of what could have been. And in that moment, I realized, this was not just their story. This was the story of countless souls stripped bare by the relentless march of history, echoing through the ages. The clock ticked on, each second a reminder that time does not heal all wounds, it merely turns them into scars, reminders of battles fought and lost. The ruins of their village stood as a monument, not to glory, but to a relentless cycle of pain. The darkness loomed, and their fight was far from over. As night descended, I could feel the weight of their resolve. It was a fragile thing, a flickering flame against the relentless winds of fate. And as I watched them, I knew their story was still being written, the ink of their lives bleeding into the pages of history, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity, even when faced with the unbearable. The air was thick with smoke and sorrow, the acrid stench of burnt flesh curling like a serpent around the ruins of Jerusalem. A soldier stumbled through the aftermath, his armor dented and blooded, memories clawing at the edge of his mind like a pack of wolves. Marcus. He had once been a farmer, a simple man who tilled the soil under the warm sun, not a warrior drenched in the chaos of war. The streets, now a graveyard of dreams, echoed with the cries of the living and the wails of the dead. He had come to liberate, to claim a holy promise, but now he stood among the ashes of hope, feeling more lost than ever. I remember the day I left home, my mother's frail hands clasped around my own, shaking like leaves in a storm. "You'll come back, won't you?" she had asked, her voice breaking as if it were made of glass. I had promised her the sun and the stars, but all I had brought her was silence and a shadow of my former self. The faces of comrades who had once laughed with me now haunted my dreams, their laughter turning to screams, twisting into whispers of regret. I could feel the weight of their lives pressing against my chest, an unbearable reminder that every choice had a cost. Then there was Ilara, a healer whose hands were both gentle and unyielding, stained with the blood of the fallen. She had been a beacon of hope in a world turned to ash, a soft touch in the midst of brutality. But every patient she failed to save ripped another piece from her heart, and I watched as the light in her eyes dimmed with each passing day. "We can't save them all," I had whispered once, hoping to ease her burden. She had looked at me, her gaze like steel, and replied, "But we must try." I felt the ache in my chest, knowing that she was the last thread holding my own heart together. As the sun set behind crumbling walls, casting long shadows that danced like specters, I found myself wandering toward the river, where the memories of battles washed like blood into the current. I kneeled beside the water, desperate for a moment of clarity, but all I found was a reflection of my tormented soul. The sky bled colors I could hardly name, swirling hues of despair and longing. Night fell, heavy and suffocating, as if the universe itself mourned the loss of innocence. I remember the stories of the Crusades, vibrant tales that danced on the tongues of poets, but in this moment, they felt like cruel jokes. Was glory worth this pain? Was faith a sword or a shackle? A soft whisper in my heart urged me to return, to find my way back to the green fields, to the laughter of my mother, but each step I took felt like a betrayal to those I had left behind. A cacophony of ghosts danced around me, their hands reaching from beyond the grave, and I felt their urgency, their calls blending into a symphony of despair. Ilara appeared beside me, her silhouette framed by the moonlight, and for a moment, the world paused. "They need us," she said, her voice a fragile thread in the dark. "But we need to find our way home first." Home. The word was a spectre, both sweet and bitter, lingering on the edge of my thoughts like a haunting melody. What did it mean anymore? Home was not a place, it was a feeling, an echo of laughter and warmth. But in this war-torn land, home felt as distant as the stars. Suddenly, a scream shattered the silence, a mother calling for her lost child, and the haunting sound reverberated through my bones. I turned to Ilara, desperation clawing at my throat. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling at her sides. "We keep moving. We find those who are lost. We fight for them, even if it breaks us." And so we set out, weaving through the rubble, our hearts pounding in sync with the chaos surrounding us. Each shadow held a story, each breath a prayer. We encountered the wounded, the broken, and the despairing, each face a mirror reflecting our own suffering. I felt the weight of their eyes upon me, searching for hope, for salvation, and I could do nothing but offer my hands, raw and shaking. I remember the first child we found, small and curled in a ball, clutching a tattered doll. The innocence of her face brought tears to my eyes, an ache that threatened to consume me. "What's your name?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She looked up, confusion mingling with fear, and whispered, "I don't remember." The word sliced through me like a blade, and in that moment, I realized how many lives had been reduced to mere echoes, forgotten in the aftermath of bloodshed. Time itself felt warped, as if it were playing a cruel trick, stretching moments into eternity and collapsing years into a single heartbeat. The night wore on, and we became shadows in a world painted by grief. With every soul we touched, we forged connections that transcended our suffering, binding us together in a tapestry of shared existence. But the darkness loomed, ever present, a reminder that the battlefield was not just outside, it was within us. A confrontation brewed on the horizon, a storm of emotions ready to unleash chaos. I felt it coiling in my chest, a tension that throbbed like a war drum. Our journey was far from over, and as we pressed forward, I could hear the whisper of destiny in my ears, calling us deeper into the night. Ilara caught my gaze, her eyes reflecting the flicker of something unyielding, a fire that could not be extinguished. "We'll find our way," she said, a promise laced in steel. And so we walked, two souls tangled in a world of shadows, a dance of despair and hope, spiraling into a destiny that would change everything. The echoes of the past surged like waves, relentless and consuming, pulling us toward an uncertain future, where home was a flickering flame waiting to be reignited, a place that still lived within us, even amidst the ruins. The night hung heavy, pregnant with silence, as the last echoes of battle faded into the darkness. I could hear my heart thumping in my chest, a grim reminder of life amid all that death. Shadows flickered under the moonlight, casting grotesque shapes on the ground, twisting into what might have been specters of fallen knights or the ghosts of their rage. My breath caught like a stone in my throat, and I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. This was not just a battle, it was the culmination of a fevered dream, the Crusades, an endless cycle of pain and pride. I stood beside Thomas, a man whose eyes mirrored the torment of 1,000 lost souls. He had come seeking glory, draped in the armor of righteousness, but now all he wore was the pallor of despair. "I remember," he whispered, voice trembling like a bare branch in winter, "the promises we made. The land that would be ours. The blood, Christ, the blood." His hands were stained, not just with the remnants of battle but with a deeper guilt, one that clawed at his conscience like a ravenous beast. He was a soldier, yes, but also a man who had, at one point, believed he could be more than just a weapon. Across the clearing, cloaked in the shadows, stood Ilara. Fierce, defiant, a woman forged in the fires of rebellion. She was not just a figure among the chaos but a beacon of defiance against the very ideals that had drawn Thomas into this hell. "You think this is honor?" Her laughter cut through the gloom like a jagged knife, yet it trembled, echoing with the fragility of hope. "You think this bloodshed brings us closer to God? Or are we just pawns on a chessboard, sacrificing lives for kings who never cared?" Her words ignited something within me, a spark of truth that felt both liberating and terrifying. The night was alive with memories, echoes of the past intertwining with our present. I remembered my own navet, the way I had once romanticized the tales of chivalry, knights in shining armor riding into battle for the sake of faith. But we were not in a story. We were trapped in a nightmare spiraling into darkness, where the line between right and wrong blurred as the blood flowed like a river. The stench of death, hot, oppressive, wrapped around us, a reminder that glory was merely a mirage dancing on the horizon. Every swing of the sword steals a piece of your soul, I murmured, recalling the old tales my father told me as a child, tales that celebrated the heroism of those who sought the Holy Land. But now, those tales felt tainted, grotesque in their simplicity. I stood in a graveyard of ideals, a witness to the twisted legacy of our actions. Behind me, a distant wail rose, a mother's cry for her lost son, echoing the very essence of our folly. "Why do we fight?" Thomas asked, his voice barely more than a breath. "For land? For power? Or for a promise long broken?" His question hung in the air, a dark specter that dared us to confront the truth we all feared. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, the answer lurking just beneath the surface, like a curse waiting to be spoken. Ilara stepped closer, her presence grounding, fierce as a storm. "We fight for the illusion of control," she stated, her voice steady, yet edged with something unspoken. "But what if we cast off these chains? What if we could rise from the ashes of what we've done?" Her eye sparked with a fire that threatened to consume her, a longing for liberation that resonated deep within my heart. I wanted to believe her, to push back against the tide of despair, yet I felt the weight of history anchoring me, holding me captive in its merciless grip. I remember the stories, the blood-soaked pages of history that told of glory, conquest, righteousness. But what was glory when bathed in the tears of the innocent? The irony twisted in my gut like a dagger, and I felt the world around me tilt on its axis. Time slipped away, a cruel trickster, reminding me that the past was not so far behind. The Crusades had been a fever dream, a nightmare that bled into the present, each act of violence a chain linking us to that cursed history. I glanced back at Thomas, at the man who had once been so certain, so full of bluster. He was a shell now, haunted by the specters of his decisions, the weight of his actions draped over him like a shroud. "We're the ghosts of our own making," I whispered, feeling the truth seep into my marrow. "Cursed to repeat the sins of those who came before us." The wind shifted, carrying with it the cries of the past. The air vibrated with the echoes of swords clashing, men shouting, the relentless march of war. I felt it, a ripple of energy coursing through me, drawing me towards the precipice of confrontation. What awaited us on the other side? Redemption? Damnation? Or something far more elusive? In that moment, as the shadows gathered like hungry wolves at our heels, I knew that we stood at the crossroads of history, the air thick with the weight of decisions yet to be made. I felt the pull of the past, the lure of destiny, and the tremor of uncertainty. All around us, the world was shifting, history beckoning us to choose our path, to confront our demons, to reconcile the legacy we carried in our hearts. And as I looked at my companions, Thomas, who had lost his way, and Ilara, who dared to dream of something more, I realized that this was not just a battle of swords. It was a battle of souls. A reckoning that would define not just our lives, but the lives of those who would come after us. I remember every moment that led us here, every choice that forged our fates. The night was alive, electric with possibility, as we prepared to confront the ghosts of our legacy, the legacy of crusading, an inheritance steeped in blood, beset with misperceptions, desperate for understanding. As the moon cast its pale light, we gathered our courage, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the truth, raw, unyielding, was waiting just beyond the shadows. A child's scream shatters the stillness, a haunting echo bouncing off ancient stone walls, mingling with the stench of scorched earth and despair. I stand there, paralyzed, my heart racing, as dust hangs in the air like a shroud. The ground trembles beneath me, and not from an earthquake, but from the weight of loss, the heavy footsteps of soldiers marching into a land that feels increasingly foreign. The sun hangs low, a bruised orange orb bleeding into the horizon, while the shadows stretch, clawing at the remnants of a once vibrant world. I remember a time when the olive trees stretched toward the sky, their gnarled branches whispering secrets to the wind. But now, they stand like sentinels, silent, hollow-eyed, ravaged by greed and neglect. This land, cradle of civilizations, now gasps for breath, suffocated by pollution and conflict. The air is thick with the acrid smell of burning plastic and chemicals, an unholy incense offered to the gods of modernity. Then there's Layla, her spirit as fierce as the sun above, but today it flickers like a candle in the wind. She crouches near an uprooted tree, fingers tracing the scars on its bark, tears mingling with the soil. "They'll never understand," she whispers, her voice breaking, a delicate thread unraveling. This was home. This was life. Each word is a dagger, piercing the silence, reverberating through my chest like thunder. I want to reach out, to promise her that it doesn't have to be this way, but the words catch in my throat, a bitter ash that chokes me. I catch a glimpse of Amir, his face a canvas of grief and anger, eyes aflame with a wildness that feels both tragic and beautiful. He stands tall, fists clenched by his sides, as if he could punch the very ground into submission. "Look at what they've done," he cries, voice rising like smoke in the wind, desperate for acknowledgement. "They've turned our heritage into a wasteland." The weight of his words hangs heavy, thick as the dust that coats our skin. The weight of history, ancient and heavy, presses down on us. I remember, no, I can't forget, the old man who once taught me the names of the stars. He pointed to the heavens and spoke of constellations that had witnessed centuries unfold. "They are our ancestors watching over us," he said, his weathered hands tracing the celestial map. But now, the stars feel distant, obscured by the haze of industry and the screams of the forsaken. The cosmos seems to mock us, glittering with indifference as we struggle with our smallness, our fragility. The wind howls, carrying with it the cries of those displaced, lives uprooted like the very trees Layla mourns. I see a family huddled together, faces etched with fear and uncertainty. A child clutches a tattered teddy bear, its eyes wide and glassy, reflecting the horror that surrounds us. I want to tell them that they are not alone, that we are all in this together, but the words slip away, lost in the cacophony of despair. "Do something!" Layla shouts, her voice rising above the din, raw and pleading. "We can't just sit here and let them destroy everything we love." She looks at me, desperation etched on her face, and for a moment, I feel the weight of her hope and fear. What can we do? How can we fight against a force so powerful it seems to swallow entire cities whole? I remember a time when hope flickered like fireflies in the dark, illuminating our way forward. We'd gather at night, sharing stories of the past, dreams for the future, our laughter rising up to the stars. But now, all I hear is the echo of empty promises and broken dreams. The city looms behind us, a monstrous silhouette silhouetted against the blood-red sky, breathing smoke and sorrow. The moment stretches, taut as a drawn bowstring, before being released into chaos. Sirens wail in the distance, a mournful dirge for what has been lost. The ground shakes again, but this time it's not just the soldiers, it's the earth itself, rebelling against the harm inflicted upon it. I glance at Amir, his face twisted in rage, and for a second, I see a flash of a warrior in him, a protector rising to defend his land. "Enough," he shouts, voice echoing, demanding. "We can't let them take our spirit. This land is ours, our ancestors fought for it, bled for it." The fervor in his words stirs something within me, igniting a spark I thought was long extinguished. I want to grasp that fire, to carry it with me into the darkness, but the shadows are long, and they whisper doubts into my ears. Layla straightens, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, her resolve hardening like the bark of the trees around us. "We will fight," she declares, her voice rising, a call to arms. Not with weapons, but with the stories of our past, the dreams we refuse to let die. Something shifts in the air, an electric charge, the promise of a storm brewing on the horizon. I can feel it in my bones. This is the moment where everything changes, where we decide to reclaim our narrative, to stand against the tides of destruction. But what will that mean? What price will we pay for our defiance? My heart races, each beat a reminder of the stakes. I want to hold on to this feeling, to bottle it like the fleeting scent of jasmine that once filled the air of my childhood home. But as I stand on the precipice of action, a chilling dread clings to me, the shadows whispering of consequences yet unseen. The world around us spins, dreams and nightmares colliding, as we prepare to face the ghosts of our past. The city, the trees, the stars, they are all witnesses now, and I wonder, as I look into the fierce eyes of my friends, whether we can summon the strength to illuminate the darkness, to rise like the phoenix from the ashes of our shared grief. With every heartbeat, we stand at the edge of something vast and ungraspable, a moment suspended in time, ready to plunge into the chaos and claim our place in the story that is far from over. The fight is just beginning, and though the path is shrouded in uncertainty, it beckons us forward, pulling us into the depths of our own resolve. And as we take that first step into the unknown, I know one truth: we are not merely fighting for survival, we are fighting for our very souls. The clock struck midnight, echoing through the empty church like the last desperate breath of a dying man. Shadows danced along the stone walls, whispering secrets of sins long buried under layers of prayer and guilt. I stood there, heart racing, eyes fixed on the altar where Father Elias knelt, head bowed, as if the weight of the world rested upon his frail shoulders. The flickering candlelight threw grotesque shapes into the air, twisting faith into something both beautiful and horrific. This was the moment when hope and despair collided, when faith became a weapon, sharp and unforgiving. I remember the first time I laid eyes on that altar, how it felt like being struck by lightning. The air had crackled with a divine electricity, drawing in the lost and the broken, the desperate souls seeking salvation. It was a refuge, or so I thought. But now, as the smell of burnt candles mixed with incense, the sanctuary felt more like a prison than a haven. I could see it in Father Elias's trembling hands. They carried the burden of unspoken secrets, truths that gnawed at his insides like rats in the walls. And then there was Clara, my sister, sitting in the back row, her eyes glazed over, lost somewhere between reality and a dream. She used to believe in magic, in the stories spun by our mother about angels and demons. But the church had carved a different path for her. I watched her hands clench tightly around a rosary, knuckles white, as if squeezing the life out of her faith. It was a desperate grip, a fight against the darkness creeping into her heart, threatening to extinguish the flicker of hope that remained. "Clara," I whispered, but the sound barely escaped my lips, swallowed by the heavy silence. "Clara, can you hear me?" Her gaze remained unfocused, lost in the shadows. I could feel the darkness wrapping around her, clawing at her soul. It was a creeping dread, a soul-crushing despair that felt like a ghost, lingering just beyond reach. The echoes of the past flooded my mind, the childhood laughter that had once filled these walls now replaced with the chilling silence of uncertainty. "Do you believe in miracles?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. "What miracle?" she snapped back, eyes flashing with the intensity of a dying star. "Look around, Leo. These walls don't hold magic, they just hold regret." A pang of sorrow shot through me, sharp and stinging. She was right, of course. This sacred place had become a crucible, where faith was tested and often found wanting. I had seen it in others, the way hope could transform into blind fanaticism, how love could twist into something unrecognizable. The church had become a double-edged sword, slicing through the hearts of those who sought refuge but often found despair instead. Father Elias suddenly rose, his voice cracking like thunder against the stone walls. "We must not waver in our faith," he cried, desperation painting his words with urgency. "In these dark times, we must cling to our beliefs. They are our salvation." But I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. It was a mirror to my own heart, reflecting the chaos within. I had seen the faces of the congregation, the hollow eyes gazing up at him as if he were a prophet. Yet, I knew the truth, their faith was a fragile thread, fraying at the edges, ready to snap at any moment. "Is this our salvation?" I thought, looking at Clara, her body tense, as though she were caught in a storm just waiting to unleash itself. "Is this all there is?" The air thickened with tension, electric and palpable, as Clara suddenly shot up, her voice rising above the silence, raw and cutting. "You think faith will save you, Father? You think these prayers will shield us from a world that devours the innocent? We are more than your rituals." Gasps echoed through the pews, but Clara didn't falter. Her voice rang out, a clarion call in the darkness. You preach about love, about hope, yet you wield faith like a weapon, striking those who dare to question. How many have you lost to your delusions? Father Elias's face twisted in anguish, the weight of her words crashing down on him like a tidal wave. I could see the truth of her accusation seeping into the cracks of his faith, his armor of righteousness beginning to crumble. Clara, I called, the words tumbling from my mouth, but she was lost in her fury, wrestling with demons that clung to her like shadows. This isn't the place for this. But she was too far gone, her anguish spilling over, a dam finally breaking under the pressure. The congregation shifted, unease rippling through the crowd. I felt the air thicken, the tension mounting like a storm about to unleash its fury. This is the place, she shouted, her voice fierce and unyielding. This is where we confront the lies. The fear. The darkness that festers in the name of faith. And as she stood there, fully alive and pulsating with raw emotion, I felt a part of me awaken. The flames of her courage ignited something deep within me, a desire to fight against the restraints of blind faith, to expose the hypocrisy that lurked behind the stained glass. The shadows shifted, swirling around us, as if the church itself breathed in the weight of our words, absorbing the chaos, the fear, and the hope. I could hear the clock ticking in the distance, a reminder of the time slipping away, the fleeting moments where faith could save or shatter, where love could bind or break. And I knew, in that moment, this was only the beginning. The confrontation wasn't just within the walls of this church, it pulsed through our veins, a battle between light and dark, faith and doubt, love and loss. I looked at Clara, her fierce spirit igniting a fire within me. We were standing at the edge, teetering between belief and disbelief, faith and despair. The path ahead was shrouded in shadows, but as her words echoed through the night, I felt the heartbeat of something larger, something electrifying. This was our story, a testament to the power of faith as a double-edged sword, cutting through the veil of our realities. In that sacred space, I realized we were not alone in our struggle. The church may have held the ghosts of our fears, but it also held the light of our hopes. And as the confrontation unfolded, we were not just fighting for our own salvation, we were challenging the very essence of faith itself. The air was thick with smoke, the kind that chokes the breath and clings to the mind like a bad dream. A single, piercing scream split the night, sharp, raw, and unrelenting. It echoed off the stone walls of Jerusalem, a city steeped in sanctity yet soaked in blood. Raindrops of fire fell in the distance, illuminating the silhouettes of men who were once brothers, now turned to shadows of their former selves, lost in the chaos of conquest and betrayal. I remember the taste of fear, metallic and bitter on my tongue, as I crouched behind a crumbling wall, the stench of burnt flesh rising from the streets, mingling with the cries of people caught in a storm of faith and fury. Elias was there too, a scholar with dreams as grand as the sun-kissed spires towering above us. He clutched an ancient tome to his chest, its pages marred by the grime of war. He believed in a God of compassion, yet here he was, watching men butcher each other over a promise of paradise. Each strike of the sword felt like a stab in his own heart, and I could see it reflected in his wide, haunted eyes. This can't be what he wants, he whispered, voice trembling as he faced the chaos. A question hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating: is faith worth the cost of the soul? Across the battlefield, a woman named Miriam fought her own war. She wielded a dagger, not as a soldier, but as a protector, her fierce spirit igniting the flickering hope within those who had lost everything. You must fight, she shouted, her voice a clarion call against the blood-soaked night. I could see the way her hands trembled, betraying the fear that clawed at her heart. She had witnessed the worst the world had to offer, the death of her family, the destruction of her home. Yet, she stood firm, eyes blazing with a defiance that cut through the despair. For every life lost, we must take two. It was an absurd proclamation, a desperate plea for a meaning that slipped through her fingers like sand. I remember the moment when the walls began to shake, not from the trembling earth but from the weight of their choices: Elias, with his faith eroding under the weight of bloodshed, and Miriam, caught in a cycle of violence she never wanted. Their struggles were mine, intertwined in a tapestry of sorrow and defiance, a living testament to the madness that surrounded us. What could faith offer when drenched in such horror? I wanted to scream, to cry out that this wasn't the answer, but the words choked in my throat, stifled by the roar of battle. As the sky darkened, a shadow loomed over the city, an omen whispered through the cracks of history. The knights, once noble in their pursuit, had morphed into monstrous reflections of their intentions, heroes turned to harbingers of doom. I could see them, cloaked in armor, their faces hidden behind visors, the glint of their swords a promise of death. This wasn't glory, it was a grotesque carnival of despair. I felt the weight of their sins, as if each clash of metal was a reminder that faith and violence were tangled in an unholy embrace. "Why do we fight?" Elias questioned, his voice barely rising above the cacophony of war. Tears glistened in his eyes, traces of a man who had once believed in the sanctity of their mission. "Is this what we were promised? A land of milk and honey, or a graveyard of dreams?" I wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that sometimes, faith morphs into a weapon. Sometimes, belief can blind us to our own humanity. But even as I thought this, my own heart sank into the depths of conflict. What did I believe? Was it worth fighting for? I held onto a fragile thread of hope, a whisper amidst the chaos, yet it felt insubstantial. Miriam charged into the horde, her dagger a glint of defiance. I followed, drawn to her fierce spirit, the raw intensity of her battle igniting my own heart. In that moment, she was a beacon of light in an ocean of darkness, and I could feel the pulse of her determination sinking with my own. But even as we fought side by side, I saw the cracks, the moments when her gaze faltered, when doubt seeped in like a creeping fog. I felt it too, hope is a precarious thing. In the throes of violence, it dances between triumph and tragedy, a fragile butterfly caught in a storm. I remember the ghosts of fallen men, their faces haunting me, whispering tales of both honor and regret. They were brothers, fathers, lovers, each with their own dreams, now lost to the abyss. What had they believed? Had they found valor in their bloodshed, or was it merely the echo of a distant prayer gone awry? The shadows whispered their stories into my soul, lingering there like a dark cloud, heavy with unanswered questions. The night wore on, each heartbeat a reminder of the fragility of our existence. Each battle cry a testament to our despair. The city became a canvas of chaos, painted in hues of red and black. We fought not for glory but for survival, and in that desperate struggle, something beautiful emerged. An unlikely bond had formed between Elias and Miriam, both shackled by their beliefs but united in their humanity. I watched as they exchanged glances, a flicker of understanding passing between them, a shared acknowledgement of their pain. It was a fleeting moment, yet it burned brighter than the fires consuming the city. And as the sun began to rise, casting a golden hue over the remnants of the night's horrors, I knew we were left with more than just ashes. We were left with questions that would haunt us long after the swords were sheathed. Had we lost our way in the pursuit of faith, or had we merely stumbled upon the truth, a truth that lay tangled within the wreckage of our souls? I stood among the ruins, a silent witness to their struggle, their heartache. The sun's embrace felt warm yet cold, a bittersweet reminder that the cycle of violence never truly ends. It merely shifts form, a never-ending loop of pain and redemption. I remember the faces, the whispers, the screams, and I knew this was a reflection not just of the past but of a future yet to be written. Would we ever learn? Would we ever wake from this nightmare? The answers lay buried within our hearts, waiting for the dawn.